Unsurprisingly, the Nerd and Tie podcast is a part of the Nerd and Tie podcast network. You can find podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime to witchcraft at nerdandtie.com. Also, consider joining our community on Discord by finding an invite at nerdandtie.com/discord. Did you know you could sponsor Nerd and Tie? That's right, for just $20 we'd say your name here and how cool you look in those jeans today. Like, seriously, dude, they're kicking. Anyways, just go to nerdandtie.com and click on the sponsor information to find out more. Or contribute to our legal fund by going to gofundme.com/nerdandtie. On this episode of Nerd and Tie, we mourn the passing of Wayne McCloud. We give our review of Netflix's Cowboy Bebop, and then we're just going to dedicate the rest of this month's episode, just the rest of it, to talking about what the hell happened to Daisho Con. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about on this episode of Nerd and Tie. Welcome to Nerd and Tie, the only podcast on the internet with a dress code. I am one of your hosts, Trey Dorn. Joining me, as always, are the wondiferous Nick Izumi.
Word up!
And the indomitable Gen Proc.
What's up?
And it has been a month, and it's been a month with news so big that we just kind of said, screw talking about Hawkeye.
It's fine so far. There you go.
Yeah,
you're set.
We'll talk about we'll talk about Hawkeye next month. All I know is I'm watching 2 Haley Steinfeld shows at the same time right now, and I'm not starting that League of Legends one. Okay, I'm not. 3 Haley Steinfeld shows is too many at once. Because I also watch Dickinson, which is really good.
I just think Haley Steinfeld needs to talk to her agent about putting her in genre movies and TV shows where she communicates with nonverbal yellow creatures, because that's becoming a thing for her. Like, between Bumblebee and Hawkeye, there's a lot. There's just a lot going on where she just talks to yellow things that can't talk back. If Pizza Dog talks, I'm walking.
Okay. But yeah, she's also Gwen Stacy in the Spider-Verse movies. So
Spider-Verse,
yeah. Yeah. All right. Anyways, I'm just gonna say that, like, you know, it makes going and watching an episode of Dickinson really weird right after watching 2 episodes of Hawkeye. Anyways, to get serious for a minute and to talk about something that there's no good way to segue into this. But our top story is that last week we were informed that Wayne McCloud passed away. Wayne McCloud, for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, is it was a longtime vendor in the Midwestern convention scene. If you went to a sci-fi convention in like Wisconsin or Minnesota in the last several decades, you've met Wayne McCloud. He was when we launched No Brand Con back in 2002. He was one of our first vendors. When we did the Nerd and Tie Expo in 2016, he was one of our vendors. He's just been all over the place and just a regular fixture of the convention circuit around these parts. And so I don't have a lot of details about what happened, but
he's been dealing with health issues for a long time, so I can't say I'm shocked, but still hurts.
Yeah, it's so we wanted to take a moment to remember Wayne McCloud. I know a lot of people around like the Nerd and Tie Network, like Vink and Sean Orange of Famicom Dojo both have some pretty fond memories of him. So it's rough.
He was legitimately the first person who I ever bought Doctor Who merchandise from. And in a really taking it back twist, when I was in high school, he was the first person who I bought anything from at No Brand Con because he had some retro Gundam model kits, and I picked them up because apparently no one else wanted them.
Yeah, he was a regular vendor at No Brand Con for a really long time through like 2016 or 2017. In recent years, he hadn't been there, but and I will tell you, it was because we couldn't get a hold of him, because he gave us the wrong email address. But it was he was a regular fixture in our vendor room for a very long time. For those of you who don't know, I am a co-founder of No Brand Con, and I am the current con director and president of No Brand Con. That is unrelated to anything I'm doing Nerd and Tie, but just full disclosure, because we're going to be talking about con scene stuff later in this episode that's not involving this. So I'm just going to say that. So yeah, we wanted to just remember Wayne, and our condolences to those who knew him in the convention circuit, and to his family.
Rest in peace, Wayne.
Yeah. So I don't know how to segue out of that into the next topic.
Well, I don't know how we're going to carry that weight, Trey.
Oh my God. Did you... Okay, I'm going to just... Did you just...
I've been watching Get Back on Disney Plus, but yeah, no, that's the real reason.
Did the thing?
I did the thing.
You did the thing.
I did the thing.
All right, so look, it's been a recurring topic on this show for months, but the Cowboy Bebop Netflix series is out. And Nick and I watched the whole thing, and Gen's watched enough of it that we're going to give our spoiler-free review of the first season of Netflix Cowboy Bebop.
I think I'm about halfway through it.
What episode are
What
you on?
What episode are you on?
Ooh. I think we got past 4.
Okay.
3 or 4.
Okay. I was just curious because episode 6 is my favorite.
Yeah,
so
I
that's
haven't gotten
also
there
my
yet.
favorite.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, so we're going to try to keep this spoiler-free mostly to not spoil things for Gen, actually. We don't really care about you guys. We may spoil... If you haven't watched the original Cowboy Bebop TV series and you're listening to this, be warned, we may spoil a series that's over 20 years old. I hope you're okay with that.
I'm in this weird camp, and I mean, I'm willing to be, if you disagree with me, let me know. Bebop is one of those shows that I don't feel like can properly be spoiled. I feel like it telegraphs its big stuff from the beginning.
The only thing I feel like
yeah.
you can't. The only thing I feel like you can spoil in Bebop is the final episode.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are certain things that...
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ending. You can spoil the ending. So the Netflix Cowboy Bebop, this live-action series, is hot take here, guys. I like it. I like it a lot.
Whoa.
It's a it's best described as a remix. Like it's not a like it's not retelling the exact same story.
Thank God.
Even if episode 1 is very close to remaking Asteroid Blues, sometimes shot for shot, which is my least favorite episode of Cowboy Bebop. Like, let me tell you, like I get people like, so I've seen complainers on the internet, and one was like, I made it like only 30 minutes in, and it was like awful compared to the original. I'm like, that's the episode that's most like the original series. I'm like, that's the one I hate. I don't hate it, but it's like in my opinion, this is my opinion, Asteroid Blues, the first episode of the original Cowboy Bebop, is it's not bad. I don't think it's bad, but I think it's one of the weakest episodes of the show. And that I've had to, since I've, like, whenever I've introduced people to Cowboy Bebop, I've always started them at the beginning. It is also one of the ones I've seen the most.
Yeah.
And so I have seen Asteroid Blues so much that it's one of the few episodes whose titles I actually remember. Like, I forget the titles. I don't forget the title of that episode. I've seen this so many times. And so, like, it was when episode 1 departs from being a remake and actually, like, gives what's her face a motivation, a character whose name I've never bothered learning.
I remember the name of
Asimov's
her
girlfriend.
Asimov's girlfriend. Yeah.
Oh, her.
Yeah.
And they actually give her a motivation in this version. And then Faye shows up in episode 1, and you're like, okay, we're not doing I breathed the sigh of relief that I was like, okay, things are going to be different. And then they diverge the further you go from that episode.
I was super relieved because I enjoyed the first episode, but I was also like, I really hope it's not just going to be a longer version of a show that I already like. And after the first episode, that is not the problem at all. They, like you said, remix. They take elements and ideas from the original, but they take them in a different direction and do really interesting, fun stuff with it. I'm also, hot take, I also really enjoyed this show. I think there are a lot of legitimate things to dislike in it, but I think most of the hate that I've seen online is not about those legitimate issues. Yeah. Like, if I'm going to be very blunt about it.
Yeah, my biggest complaint about the show was that the amount of time spent with Vicious, because I have never given two craps about Vicious, and as I said, as I said online, I've never cared about Vicious, and this show is not going to make me start. But what I will say is, without any spoilers, what I figured out as that story went on is that it was more about, that entire storyline is way more about what's going on with Julia. And they did make me start to care about Julia, which I thought was impossible because she's not really a character in the original series. And the character that they've created for this show is very different than the Julia we had in the original Bebop, but I think that's for the better.
Yeah, because the changes made to Julia were, in my opinion, welcome, because if you would have done the same thing again, you have a sexy lamp. And in a longer than 20-minute episode span, you notice that it's just a sexy lamp.
Well, she only shows up outside of flashback in, like, the final episodes of the original Bebop. Yeah, and so, like, she shows up right at the end of the original series, and other than that, it's just flashbacks through Spike's memories. So she's like, and she's such a, like, this stereotype of, this femme fatale stereotype in the original Bebop that doesn't really, like, she's not a character, and what character she was already a cliche when they made Bebop, and they used it as a shorthand, and that works in the original series only because we don't spend so much time with Spike's backstory in that series as we do in this one. But they made Julia actually a character with motivations and reasons to do things now. And so they took her in a weird direction I did not expect, but I like it.
I'm gonna confess, around episode 3, I figured out what direction they were taking her in, and I really enjoyed it. But honestly, I don't feel that that's even the idea of something being predictable as something dismissive. I disagree with that being. I disagree with anyone who found that predictable, because frankly, I'd say that that's good foreshadowing in a story.
Yeah,
is that you're showing what direction you want to go in, that there's forethought.
Yeah,
I figure they were going there, and I'm happy they went there. I think it's really exciting because it's territory I haven't been in before.
I don't think I necessarily saw it coming myself, but once I did, like, I put the pieces together, and that's the way a story like that should be structured. Like, it's not that you have to, like, telegraph every move you're gonna make, but the audience should be able to, like, look at the story path and go, like, oh, I saw how that happened. Like, you should be able to draw the line once it's connected. And some people are gonna guess ahead of time, and some people aren't, and that's good. That's doing your job as a writer. But I love John Cho as Spike. Oh my god. The casting in this is just so amazing.
The cast are all standouts. The exception being that while I think he worked in the last 3 episodes, I do think Alex Hassel was miscast as Vicious. I just think he's not a good actor.
Oh, I thought his performance was fine. I just didn't think his face looked right for Vicious. Like, that was my nitpick with his casting on Vicious was because Vicious, I think he emoted the exact right amount for Vicious, but Vicious, like, he's supposed to be prettier.
Someone described Alex Hassel's Vicious as if Geralt of Rivia got really into crypto, and I can't unsee it now.
But I feel like you could use that description about the original Vicious too.
That's probably fair.
He carries a sword. Who carries a sword?
Someone who studied the blade.
Right. No, I mean, like, he's in the original Bebop, he's already a bit of a weeb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that part I thought was fine. It's just that his face isn't pretty enough.
I can agree with that.
Because they draw him pretty in the original, and he's, like, a little too worn in my mind. But
my favorite performance, hands down, is Danielle Pineda.
Oh my god, I love her Faye Valentine.
Her Faye is extremely funny. I feel like not enough people are talking about how freaking expressive her face is. A mutual friend of ours, Ethan, who's an excellent artist, has one of my favorite faces because they will emote in the most ridiculously over-the-top ways. And Danielle Pineda has a very similar range of being able to emote so much with her face. Yeah. And I kind of loved her dialogue delivery. I just loved the character. I think they did a really great job with her.
Oh yeah, no, it's I love her face. She's amazing. I feel like she captures Faye Valentine, like, in her performance so well. Like, like, it's just you couldn't, and I'm so glad they just decided to put her in episode 1 immediately. And I like the modifications they made to Faye's backstory, where because they did make some modifications to Faye's backstory. It's pretty early on, where you find out that, like, because it's the same backstory from the original series, where she's a person who was in cryo sleep, who was awakened, and has no memory of her previous life. But in this one, it wasn't a doctor who, like, also then tried to, like, romance her and was, like, the sweetheart, like, con. It was someone who, minor spoiler, was posing as her mother, pretending to be her mother, and stole all of the, like, government benefits that would have gone with waking her up. That's stated pretty early on in dialogue, so, like, I don't think that's much of a spoiler.
The way that storyline is handled is really solid, though.
Oh, it's so good. There's
a lot of visual, not just, like, gags, but just, like, little nods and references. You really do need to be paying attention with the show, and I kind of love it for that.
And they directly recreated something that made me cry again.
Mm-hmm. Good job.
Good job, you son of a bitches. But
I have a I do want to point something out, and I feel like you'll have some insight on this one, Trey. I early on I saw people saying that the show looked cheap, and I heartily disagree. I'm not even going to say it looks perfect, but I do feel like a lot of the internet has forgotten what sci-fi shows that aren't The Mandalorian look like. Like, I hate to say it that way, but like when you don't have a Disney budget behind you, it's not going to look as
also
ridiculously
it
seamless.
doesn't look cheap. That's the thing, is I'm looking at watching at the show. I think it's because the reason why they think it looked cheap, and before we move on to talking about the cast, I really want to mention Mustafa Shakir as Jet and his amazing performance as Jet. And it's just, I have no criticisms. The man is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I love him. Anyways, but I think what people are forgetting is that obviously, like, a key thing they're doing with this show is they're attempting to light it and use color to match the color palettes of the anime. Right? Like,
which is a world of lived-in, cheap, rundown places.
Yeah. Well, they did a ton of location shooting in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you mean it looks fake? It's a real building. Like, what do you mean it looks cheap? That's a physical thing. That's a load-bearing wall. It looks bright and colorful, and people are expecting, I don't know what they're expecting, but they apparently weren't expecting Cowboy Bebop. It's just my only thought. I'm like the colors in Bebop are moody, and the palette changes depending on the scene and the setting, and like sometimes it's bright and colorful and sometimes it's dour and like low lit, but like they're aiming to replicate those visuals. What are you talking about? Like, what is supposed to look cheap about what's on screen? Is it the animation perfect costumes on Spike and Jet? Like,
I don't understand it. It's just one of those things that I saw several people saying and I didn't understand.
I think it's just a case of they want to hate it, so they want to find something wrong with it.
Yeah.
That they can just point and be like, well, that's not perfect, so I don't like it.
Well,
which is absolutely stupid, but
I can't figure out what some of these people would have wanted.
Yeah.
It's because if it was a shot-for-shot perfect remake, they would complain about it being just a worse version of the original or just doing the same thing over again. And because they've made changes, they complain about it being too different. And, like, I've seen people complain, like, certain online reviewers who like to hate on things that might be vaguely progressive, like, complain about, like, Faye Valentine, like, can't believe they wrote Faye like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Have you not watched the show this is based off of? This is 100% what her character is like. Do you not remember her introduction? Or like what do you remember Faye being like?
It's the another friend of the show, Scott from the Meat Grinder, pointed this one out to me. He was saying it's hard for him to take a lot of these criticisms seriously because he sees some people saying it's trying too hard to be the anime and other people saying it's not respectful enough to the anime, which leads him to believe there's no actual foundation to these criticisms. Because those make no sense. Those are diametric. They can't be both.
So yeah, it like
literally impossible.
I don't think it's a spoiler to say that they in part recreate part of episode 5 of the original series in an episode of this new series, just because they put a shot of it in the opening title sequence, right? the Vicious and Spike in the church it's in the title. It's in the opening titles. I saw someone complain that the show, because they play Rain, the song from episode 5,
Yeah.
and they play that song in that episode. And I saw someone say
it's a new recording of that song.
Is it?
But
It's
is
the
that
same,
song.
It's the same vocalist as one of, because there are 2 recordings of that song for the original series. There's one that they did separately for the soundtrack, and then there's the version in the episode. And I know it's the same vocalist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't, my brain didn't think about whether or not it was a new recording, just because it was, the voice came on, and I was like, yeah, it's the guy. It's the person who sings Rain.
Mm-hmm.
But they said that episode didn't earn Rain. I'm like, what do you mean didn't earn Rain? The original episode is the first time there's a big vicious thing, and you're building. That's the first time that it would have any impact. It's episode 5. It's not like we're. It's not. It's not the final confrontation between these characters in the series. It's the
first time you see them on screen together.
Yeah, what do you mean it hasn't earned Rain? It's Rain also lyrically is just a tone song. It does reflect on the emotional states of the characters in some way, and I think actually in many ways it's more apropos where it's used in the new series than how it's used in the original. What do you mean they didn't earn Rain? They didn't earn anything the first time they did it. Just because the context isn't exactly the same doesn't mean the context of the scene is slightly different, and so it didn't earn. No, it's when the opening notes to Ask DNA play in the Teddy Bomber episode,
right?
I didn't go, well, this didn't earn Ask DNA.
Right, because that's not even from the original series.
Yeah, that's the opening.
It's from the movie.
It's the opening song to the movie. What you gonna do, little buckaroo?
I'm just going to say this: the soundtrack was still done by Yoko Kanno.
Yeah.
I personally do not feel that I am qualified to say what scene needs what music over Yoko Kanno.
Yeah, me too.
I don't feel that I'm more qualified than she is in that regard. Maybe I
had this weird thing happening watching the show where I was like, I know what episode. That's not the episode this song is from, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Because that diverged pretty quickly. Because I think it was when we got the opening notes to Ask DNA. I'm like, they don't care. Yoko Kanno does not care, and if Yoko Kanno does not care, I do not care either. It's just good.
Well, it's kind of
she's more in charge.
I mean, there's a lot of aspects where they do chuck in just a buttload of references to the original. I mean, I guess spoiler for first episode, the casino being calling the casino Watanabe.
Yeah.
Nice nod. I really like that.
I caught that right away, and that was very good. It's chock full of just random references just everywhere. I think, Trey, your use of the term remix is absolutely apropos for this.
Right.
Because they literally just took original Bebop and were like, let's switch it up. Let's put this song over here and that thing over there and mush.
Yeah.
And hey, we got a new version of it.
Oh, hey, we're skipping the second verse and hitting another chorus. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got so I like that there are even references to references the original series made. This is one for the record, I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't just edited a video about Faye Valentine the days before the show came out. But in the original anime, in Faye's cryopod, it has printed across the top of it NCC 1701B, which is of course the identification numbers for the Excelsior class Enterprise.
I have a micro machine of that somewhere in my office. I don't know where though.
And so I was like, I recognize that. But then in the current TV series, both a safe box and a file Faye has about her past has NCC 1701B printed on it. And I was like, that is a deep cut even I would have missed if I hadn't just edited a video on this.
Yeah, it's so yeah, like my opinion of the show is it's not and let's be clear, the show is not above criticism. Like there are times where I get a little tired of Vicious, like the Vicious storyline. In the end I think it works out well, but I just get bored with it. But I'm not saying the show is beyond criticism. But I am saying overall it's good.
It's a pretty solid sci-fi show.
Here's my issue, is that most of the criticism I had been hearing about the show was being made by people who had never watched it yet.
Of course.
And I'm just like, excuse.
Oh yeah, no, it's like the one person
I understand you want to like criticize things, but like at least sit down and watch like an episode. At least like look at it first. Mm-hmm. And then please criticize it all you want. It's like,
that's the thing. Is like I saw someone complaining about like who's setting it like that again. They quit like 30 minutes and they're saying about how like, oh, it's terrible and I'll never. I'm like, you didn't watch any of the show.
Not I know the person you're talking about. I don't want to call them out too much, but like the way that they posted about it, even going in, was with this tone of I'm going to hate this.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna start it. Wish me luck. Ugh. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And like I know people who just like from the beginning of even hearing that there was a live action thing being made of it, were just totally against it.
Yeah.
Completely, and like hate it. Absolutely will not touch it. And it's just like, what is your deal, man? It's okay.
So,
is it the original? No. But guess what? We still have the original.
Yeah, you got 26 episodes in a movie of the original to go watch whenever you want.
Yeah.
There's a full complete story right there. You can go watch that.
It's literally on every streaming service. Like I'm not even like I know I'm kind of overstating, but it's on Netflix, it's on Tubi, it's on Hulu, it's everywhere. There's no way you can't see it. It borders on impossible.
And the Blu-rays aren't expensive either.
Mm-hmm. Can I want to say, since it seems like we're kind of wrapping up, there's one other thing that I thought was really lovely. Two other things I thought was really lovely. The original Cowboy Bebop really likes making references to classic and kind of cheesy movies that Shinichiro Watanabe liked. I mean, like, Shaft literally shows up in an Ed-focused episode.
Yeah.
Like, the guy's name is literally Shaft. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's all these little references. One of my favorite just little things early on, I think it's in episode 3 or 4, when they have this, they're dealing with the eco-fascists, who are based on the friends of the space.
Yeah.
Led by
the eco-fascists from the original series.
From the original series, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mom, the leader of the eco-fascists, is played by Adrienne Barbeau. And minor spoiler, because it's within the first 5 minutes of the episode, her secret weapon turns people into trees.
Yeah, it's
and I just thought
horrific.
That was it's absolutely horrific. It's really good body horror, but also as a film buff, it was hilarious to me because you know what classic B movie Adrienne Barbeau starred in? Swamp Thing.
Yep.
The 1982 movie. So it was like, oh, hey, you got Adrienne Barbeau and she's Swamp Thinging people. I can't think of anything much more Cowboy Bebop than literally that. I'm sorry. I really liked this show, and I thought that was a personal favorite episode.
Like, even with all the changes and all the remixing that was done, they really kept the heart and soul of Bebop alive.
Completely agreed.
Yeah.
And that's something where, like, you know, I think that is either the most important or one of the most important things of any adaptation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's great.
If it was the same thing, there wouldn't be a point.
Yeah,
I'm glad we have it.
Like, if it was the same thing all over again, I might not have watched it all. Because I just rewatched the original series within the last year. All right. So, with that kind of wraps our Cowboy Bebop review. Imperfect, but still really good. And
super worth your time.
It's worth your time. If you've never watched the original Cowboy Bebop, you should still be able to watch this fine and enjoy it. If you have watched the original Cowboy Bebop, it's different enough where you won't feel like you're watching the same show after the first episode. Well, and then there's that Jet episode, which is very much the same episode later, but with Jet's backstory.
Absolutely watch it, though.
Yeah.
Like, watch both.
Yeah.
Seriously,
it's
watch
good.
both.
Yeah, watch both. But I'm saying that, like, for the people who you don't have to go watch 26 episodes of the original show to watch the 10 episodes of the new show. Anyways, moving on to the next topic, even though I'm glad we only put 3 topics on the menu because we're 36 minutes into this episode.
Fair enough.
Daisho Con, a convention that originally started in Stevens Point and eventually moved to the Wisconsin Dells, and was one of the larger, more established conventions here in Wisconsin, has announced on November 25th that they were officially shutting their doors forever.
Permanently.
Full disclosure, again, I am the convention director for No Brand Con, which is also held in the Wisconsin Dells, and Nick is a original co-founder and former board member of Daisho Con. Who
it was my baby.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's very clear. I want to be very clear. Nick has not been a member of the board for quite some time, for many years.
I have not been involved with any of the internal workings of Daisho Con in more than 4 years.
Okay.
It's been quite some time since the last time I had anything to say.
It was that recent?
It was my last couple of years when I was involved were pretty not great, which I guess we can get into right now.
Yeah. So yeah, Daisho Con obviously canceled their 2020 dates and never announced. Did they? I know they canceled 2021. I don't remember if they announced actual dates for 2021 or if they just canceled altogether.
Yeah, I don't remember if they announced a date for 2021. I know they canceled it, and a lot of people were quite upset and shocked because it was like the week after Kitsune canceled or announced their cancellation, and Daisho Con was so much further into the year that people were really surprised by that.
I wasn't surprised by that, just because, like, sometimes in pre-registration cycles, like, so we're running No Brand Con in 2022, but when we canceled our 2021 dates in April of 2021, we were originally supposed to, well, the third set of dates for No Brand Con 2019, we're on our 4th. Now, like, when we made that cancellation, we canceled that in, like, November of the previous year because we wanted to, because we always do, like, a pre-registration push in November, and we wanted to cancel before that. Like, like, we wanted to make that decision then, because, you know, when you cancel an event, so with No Brand Con, we rolled pre-registration forward to the next dates, but we allow people to request refunds. Like, anyone can request a refund. And so we didn't want to, like, drive more pre-registrations that we were just going to have to click the button and give the money back. Because that's, you know, you're getting people's hopes up, and that's shitty. So I didn't have any criticisms with, like, when they actually, I thought them canceling was the responsible thing to do, but I didn't realize it might have been the financially necessary thing to do at the time. You know what I mean?
The whole idea. So the interesting thing, if you ask me, about the the Daisho closing is that no actual reason is given for the cancellation.
No.
Like it says that we've exhausted options, but they don't say what that means or what options, what it's in reference to.
They're very vague.
Yeah, they talk about like the after 2 years having to pause because of the pandemic, now they won't be reopening. It's not the outcome anyone wanted, and they've exhausted all potential options without actually saying. Yeah, they didn't say a single thing about what those options are. And the only thing I can imagine there are two reasons why I could see a convention canceling. One, financial instability of not having the money to run the event, and we can talk about why. There's some reasons to criticize the board in that respect, and the other reason why is that they were unable to find staff. And I will tell you that, like, I can definitely relate to the struggles with staffing. With No Brand Con, like, we've been planning technically the same No Brand Con for several years now, as we've, originally No Brand Con 2020 got moved to later 2020, and then got moved to 2021, and now it's in 2022, and we're actually going to have it now. But I was not the original convention director for No Brand Con for this event. I had previously been a convention director and was a co-founder of No Brand Con, but I was the advertising head.
Right.
and now I'm in charge because I was and honestly, I'll tell you, if I hadn't been with the organization still, we might not be moving forward, not because we couldn't find enough people to staff the event, but because we needed, like, we brought back in some people who had retired from staff to come back for our 2022 dates because we lost a number of staff for life reasons. We've had some staff members move out of state. We've had the former con director who I replaced as con director. He's getting planning his wedding. There's like a ton of so we brought in an old Adam, who was treasurer for us years ago, is back now as our treasurer. We brought back some people. And so we have, but if I hadn't been here, willing to step in and be the convention director, we might have had a much harder time. If someone else if we didn't already have an experienced person who had run multiple events before, including this one. We might not be. So staff, not being able to find the staff to run your event is the other thing, which again says some stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I might as well kind of get into some of the, I guess, nastiness. So
this is something I just want to preface this, guys. Normally, there are times on the show where we don't get all gossipy about the internal workings of conventions, mostly because usually when they're in Wisconsin, because usually we know the people and there's some fear of burning a bridge or alienating people. But in this case, we're gonna be full disclosure. I'm at least gonna be fucking catty as hell. And just straight out be completely frank and honest and not filter for PR, because guess what?
There's not really any bridges to burn.
The bridge is already underwater. You cannot burn it. Sorry.
I want to kind of take point on this, and there's another project that I'll probably be taking more point on. So again, Daisho Con was something that I co-founded with two people, Zach Allen and Zach Neal, in a dorm room back in 2007. We were really a little bit more into 2008, but we had gone to an event that we didn't really enjoy, and we decided to found a con. And it was a whole lot of fun. Daisho Con was, of course, not perfect early on. What is? But the first year did way better than what we expected, and the event continued to grow.
Well, that band you brought in was amazing. That lead singer of that band was just phenomenal. Why weren't they ever brought back?
Yes, Trey, I do recall your band, in fact, performing at our first year.
Minus
Um,
the drummer who was at a funeral. It was a mess.
um, so I want to put this up first before I get into anything else. Every con has internal drama. Daisho was no different. We had issues. We had some pretty heated arguments. The Zachs, both Zach Allen and Neil, will confirm that both of them and myself had some pretty heated discussions. The thing was, though, we could argue with each other. And even when we thoroughly disagreed with the other's take, we worked it out because we did things in the name of what was good for the con. Somewhere around the time, but as the con continued to grow, and somewhere around that time, the two Zachs, the people who founded it with me, they moved away. They took a more long distance approach. Myself and another friend of theirs and pretty decent friend of mine, Andrew. And Andrew and I were very much the people on the ground who were still going to meetings week to week. And as new people started coming in, you could start to feel a more heated divide, and not like in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I guess, when we have to really call out the person whose name continues to come up, is Missy Haberly. And there's a reason for that. Missy Brightside, whatever she goes by. I don't know if Missy has completely scrubbed herself from the internet. I know she unfriended me and blocked me years ago, so I can't confirm it, and I have no way of reaching out to her.
I don't know if I've ever met her.
Missy was, one year she was our guest head. She Due to her negligence, we actually almost lost a pretty big guest from Canada because no one bothered to get like a work visa for him to come to the United States. We were scrambling on that Friday of the con. It was bad.
Wow.
People she wasn't using the work email. We could trace that she wasn't getting things done. She was disciplined. But not long afterward, her then and still to this day live-in boyfriend, DJ, became a co-chair of Daisho Con. And under his leadership, he made a decision that we weren't going to hold Missy's previous mistakes against her, and that it wasn't fair to bring those up when talking about her future positions within the con.
What?
Yeah. There were other issues. Missy was even back then, the last I talked to her, she is a incredibly insecure person and an incredibly immature person. For starting somewhere around that time, I basically guaranteed I would get some weird, extremely angry, hate-filled letter from Missy, usually about a week before the con via Facebook, about blaming me for this, that, or the other thing. It was very bizarre. And these things were all things that were brought up when DJ, the aforementioned boyfriend, campaigned for Missy to be a con chair one year.
Okay.
We were basically everyone who founded the event, basically the entire board was against the decision. I brought in various bizarre hate-filled letters that I had received from Missy. Another one of our web developers whose name I'm not going to mention because he's gotten into some stuff recently and I really don't want to blow his cover with whatever the hell it is he's doing these days. But we'll call him DC. DC was had documentation including all the things that she failed when she was a guest head. And we were told up and down by her live-in boyfriend that Missy felt bad for all of the mistakes she made in the past, and she wanted to prove she was up for it. She could really turn things around. There was a lot of interest in her taking a leadership position from people who were staffing at the con as well. And I was not sold on the idea, but eventually the board relented because there seemed to be a big enough push from the staff themselves. This was probably the biggest mistake we ever made. God, this feels like a confessional.
Yeah.
So not long afterward, Missy, in her first meeting with the board, basically revealed that everything her boyfriend told us was absolute malarkey. She straight up said to us, and I still have the recordings of this on my old laptop, that she had no respect for any of us, and she didn't think that we should be involved anymore because we had been with the con for too long. And from there on in, things between Missy and the board of directors, which included myself at that point, were nothing short of hostile. As the year went on, things got weirder. Several legacy artists, including, again, full disclosure, my spouse, Reina Innocenti, were told they would not be accepted into the artist alley. And a couple of them just wanted some follow-up information because, like, the responses that they got were rather rude. Or at least read as rather rude. And myself and DC decided to look into it. And Missy very publicly, not very publicly, but openly in the staff-only chat groups would harass us all day, complaining why we hadn't presented our evidence yet for the issues, while please keep in mind most of the staff were at UW Stevens Point at the time. Mm-hmm. Myself and DC were full-time workers. Myself in the Midwest, DC way over on the West Coast. So we weren't even in the same time zone trying to coordinate this. But it was encouraged to harass us about these issues. Eventually, a bunch of the artists got a second letter from another character who was very much involved, named Ethan. Ethan couldn't be bothered to spell check or grammar check, so what he sent the artists was...
Let's be clear that Ethan was a different person than the Ethan we talked about in the very
not the Ethan we talked about earlier, who we adore. No, this Ethan...
Also not to be confused with my nephew Ethan, who is 9.
There are too many Ethans. Stop it.
This Ethan, sometimes known as Aussie. We'll call him that.
We'll call him Aussie.
This Ethan, also known as Aussie, just sent out these letters that were literally unreadable. I'm not using that as hyperbole. I mean, there were strings of letters that were not words that were in not sentences. And these were sent out as seemingly professional letters to the artists who were not welcomed back to the con. I would later find out from Trey. I mean, you can corroborate this if you like, Trey, Like after some of the hubbub with that, Aussie basically, while at a different event, decided to go walk up to our very own Trey and brag that they really just did it because they just wanted to single out my spouse. They just really
so Aussie like came to my table. I was an artist alley I was in the artist alley at GeekCon, and like just actually more just like I had no idea that Raina had been rejected from the artist alley at Daisho Con at this point, right? Like I had very little knowledge of the actual stuff going on, and just decided to try to explain to me why he was in the right to do it. It was this really awkward situation where he like, because I was still involved with No Brand Con at the time. Like I took a chunk of years off of No Brand Con, but I've even when I wasn't with No Brand Con, I was a co-founder. I've always been heavily associated with the con, even when the at that time No Brand Con management didn't want me to be. Or me want to be. Like, it's just an awkward thing when, like, people associate you with a project that you're not in charge of, which is now all confusing because I'm in charge of it again. But anyways, like, an unprompted started to, like, start telling me these, like, just explain, like, trying to justify his actions that I didn't even realize he had taken. And, how Nick was blowing it out of proportion, and, Nick hasn't mentioned this. I'm like, what are you talking about? Also, I will mention that it was not long after that I stopped being allowed into the artist alley at Daisho Con.
Aussie was an interesting figure in his own right because he was actually a con chair before Missy, and he started having issues with me, partly because Aussie's method of morality was if the rules say so, then it can't be wrong. So he would sometimes change the rules so that it would be okay. On one occasion, even going back and editing a piece of the website to make an argument to say that this has always been a policy, when if you looked at the editing history, he made that change.
Or archive.org.
Using someone else's login. It was not all you needed to do was Wayback Machine it, and it was like this kind of, so we were already entering some ethically questionable grounds. I was so frustrated by things, I actually told someone who was involved that I was considering quitting just because Daisho Con was becoming more and more stressful. And someone who was still involved, DC, actually told me that I needed to stick around because Daisho Con needed a conscience.
Oof, that's pressure.
That, right? But, like, in light of everything recently, that actually hits me harder than it did back then. Just how, like, one person should never be the conscience of an entire organization.
No.
That's insane. That's not tenable. Long story short, things kept getting weirder with Missy, and actually my wanting to look into how the artists were treated was brought up. This was handled for the most part behind the scenes, but then it was brought up publicly by another party who was dating Missy's co-chair, who felt the need to publicly say that I was just not capable of being impartial, and I was a liability to the organization. Somewhere around not long afterward, that same person, during a summer meeting that I could not attend, posted an angry letter an angry open letter talking about why the board of directors for Daisho Con, the founders, should not be involved with the con anymore. The webmaster and the board thought it was inappropriate and asked for it to be taken down. The person who posted it claimed we were violating his free speech. When we tried talking to the con chairs, including Missy said that Missy was adamant that it should not be taken down, and that if we wouldn't cooperate, she would start her own staff group. So after a rushed meeting, DC, the Zacks, and myself agreed to remove the administrator status from the two con chairs. It was ugly. Unfortunately for us, at this point, I was no longer living in Stevens Point either. Zach, neither of the Zacks were. It was very easy for basically the people who were there who wanted to get rid of us to say everything they could about us, and we'd have no rebuff. We eventually had an emergency meeting during the summer. I was able to sit in on it via Skype. The two Zacks and Andrew showed up for it in person. And I believe I still have the recordings of this one too. We did read the dialogue that led to the staff forum having the chairs at the time locked out. We actually got to a point where Aussie used an ableist slur against the board, and the room full of con staff laughed. And that's when we basically knew it was over.
So that's pretty terrible.
Yeah, no.
So, meanwhile,
I
didn't mean
not
to.
a big fan of that. Sorry, please go ahead.
I was going to say, meanwhile, like outside of the con, we don't, like those of us who are working other cons who have been working with Daisho Con for years have no idea this is happening. Like, you have to understand, like, from the perspective of, like, I work No Brand Con. No Brand Con's, like relationship to Daisho Con early on was really, really cooperative and positive, right? Like, No Brand Con, we have a mission to, like, help other cons, especially if they're nonprofit, or student run. Those two things. Like, we'll, like, lend equipment. We will, try to lend staff, like, all this stuff. And even when, like, there was a scheduling conflict between Daisho Con and GeekCon, which no longer exists either, we moderated it. We acted as a negotiation point between the two events because of our close ties to both. Like, so you have to understand this. The perspective is that we've had this really close working relationship, and then just one day we didn't. One day they stopped answering our calls. They stopped responding to it. Suddenly we couldn't get an ambassador table anymore. And like, there was like 1 year where either Missy or DJ were not con directors, and suddenly we were let back in. And then those people who had been con chairs for that 1 year were ousted immediately afterwards because of an unrelated situation, which, though, the more I know about the details of that, maybe they were rightfully removed, but either way, once they were removed, suddenly we were back out. And so, like, all we knew was that here's this con that used to work with us, and I mean, clearly we knew that the people in charge weren't in charge anymore, right? Like, I'm friends with Zach Neal, I'm friends with Nick, like, and I know Zach Allen. Like, I'm Facebook friends with Zach Allen. Zach Allen and I haven't really hung out, but like we all know each other, and so I knew stuff had happened, but it was still like all of this weirdness with. Also, all their contracts got really complicated and weird and poorly written all of a sudden.
Aussie had this weird hard-on for legalese, even when he had no idea what that legalese meant. So there was a lot of that.
I'll admit that back in the day, we did a lot of things on handshakes we should have had contracts for, and we do everything on contract now, but the contracts that were written included non-disclosure agreements about the contents of the contract, except you could technically still disclose that prior to signing the contract, so it was meaningless and nothing, because what happened was that people who didn't want to sign the contract started leaking them. Because they're like, well, I'm not going to sign this. Hey, everyone, look at this stupid thing they tried to get me to sign. So nobody violated. It's just you have people sign the NDA before you show them the thing that they need to sign the NDA for, guys.
Right.
It was
stupid.
It was 7 years ago, Trey. It was 7 years ago that I left the.
Yeah, no, I
event.
was like 4 years ago. That's not right.
Okay, I was like more than time is soup right now. Give me a break.
Nerd and Tie Expo was more than 4 years ago.
Jesus Christ, don't. Okay, but yeah, so we're going. 2014 was when a lot of this was going on.
All right,
Aussie and Missy actually had a pretty. Aussie especially had this policy of any con that wasn't Daisho, they would do nothing for.
Yeah.
It was a very fuck you got mine attitude.
It was weird.
and one of the worst points of this this was before that ugly meeting with the ableist slur, but I need to bring this one up too because it's worth talking about. Speaking of competition for dates, there was an event called Awesome Con. It's a chain of big for-profit cons. They were going to run an event the same weekend as Daisho Con in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
You should not read the article I wrote about it. It's badly written, and I was mad.
But it's worth noting that you did write that article.
Yeah, I did.
Nerd and Tie, this website, our news page, which was more of a thing at the time, made a big deal about it. And every con in the area rallied. No Brand was ready to fight Awesome Con. Geek Con was ready to fight Awesome Con. I didn't talk to anyone from Anime Milwaukee, but I didn't see them say anything particularly nice either. It was just people were getting ready. It's we're not going to put up with this big for-profit con coming in to elbow out one of our nonprofits. And Daisho didn't do any outreach. They didn't try to form a coalition with these other events. They maintained that bizarre radio silence. And then, to add insult to injury, when some weirdo, and I'm pretty sure we found out who it was, but when some asshole decided to buy awesomecon.net and crap on AwesomeCon's reputation.
They actually bought it and redirected it to our article.
Yeah. They bought it and redirected it to our article.
Without our consent or permission.
Without our consent.
I found out who did it and yelled at them.
The first thing that happened was the only outreach that I know of that Daisho did was people accusing me of doing it and then accusing Trey of doing it.
Yeah, I know the exact responsible party. I honestly don't know what name she's going by right now because she changed her name about 5 times.
What she did was an asshole move.
It was an
asshole
asshole
move. I know who
move,
it is too, but I'm choosing not to out them.
I literally can't because I don't know what name she's using right now. I know of 5, and I can't remember which one the current one was. But
frustratingly, we If any, so we did not buy that space. We just wrote an article talking about the facts of the matter. It got people riled up and ended up closing AwesomeCon before it could happen.
Okay, so actually, let's be clear. What closed AwesomeCon before it could happen was AwesomeCon Indianapolis flopping really hard.
Yeah.
And then Fantastic.
It was not the article.
Yeah, it
And
was
then
not the article.
It was that.
It was not the.
Plus, Fantasticon had a weird contract that they negotiated. Fantasticon, another failed convention that happened right about that, I wrote a good article about Fantasticon. Because I've talked to Ben Penrod, who was in charge of AwesomeCon at the time. I don't know if he's still with the company because they sold to Left Field Media.
Okay.
But since then, but he was the head of AwesomeCon at the time, and I've had conversations with him which were very productive since then. They had the Fantasticon had negotiated a weird contract which would have prevented AwesomeCon from coming back from a second year, like locking up the space, and so those two things meant like the complete and utter failure of AwesomeCon Indianapolis, which I know people who were at and was just like a ghost town.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that
Right,
that we had any part in it.
I did predict exactly how it would go, and I said what they are pitching us will never work, and then it didn't work. So I got to be right, but I was not responsible for it. I just was prescient. Yeah, it's and to Ben Penrod's credit is I wrote that's really mean. It was all truthful and opinion, but it was really I wrote an article sounding like a complete and total dick. Because it was very early in our writing articles, and I was used to writing stuff on my personal blog, which had a slightly less journalistic tone. Ben Penrod, to his credit, was an adult about the whole thing.
Yeah, but like there was no outreach, there was no attempt to rally. But after AwesomeCon shut down, Missy, in her infinite wisdom, went to AwesomeCon's page to tell people if they want to go to a real AwesomeCon, they should go to Daisho Con. And thereafter, the Daisho Con staff patted themselves on the back because they single-handedly defeated AwesomeCon.
They did nothing.
Exactly. They
I did
nothing.
more, and I did more, and I think I did nothing.
Yeah, no, it was a thing. It was this massive attitude. Everyone just had the biggest dongs about everything. It was just so frustrating.
So this is everything we've talked about so far is just context.
Yeah.
This is just context. That's the worst part.
Context. So you have to understand.
We're not even done with it.
So you have to understand, listeners. This is like 2014 was like the AwesomeCon stuff.
2014 was also the year, that I left.
So this is all ancient history, and you know what? It doesn't mean that the people who were running Daisho Con were a bunch of dicks. Yes, it does mean that. However, that does not mean it is necessarily going to be a bad convention they were running or an unsuccessful one. There are
the event was extremely successful.
There are way worse people out there than these people running successful events in the convention industry. So, that's why. And if you want to know why we didn't spill this tea about them, it's because frankly, they were all a bunch of dicks, but they were still running an event.
They weren't a threat to anyone else.
They weren't a threat to anyone else, and they weren't a threat to their own attendees. That's the thing is. They were running a non-profit event.
They were shitty to me.
They were shitty. Yeah, they were shitty to my friend. They were shitty to my con. But they weren't a danger to anyone. Right? Being an asshole is not a crime. It's just annoying as fuck. Anyways, so Daisho Con grew and grew and grew, and got maintained a level of success.
I'm sorry I took so long giving context. I should say that at that point, the original board of directors did leave in 2014. The official story is that we left of our own volition, And I just want that on the record. I absolutely did not leave on my own volition. I was dealing with emotional and verbal abuse from the powers that be at the time, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. And like Trey just said, I didn't feel the need to spill the tea because the event itself meant a lot to people.
Well, and
It was
honestly, yeah.
It was still a good con. Like the con was, the people running it were god awful, but the event was still meaningful for people.
Right. And it's like I was there some of the years that after that happened, and like it was. I have like criticisms as I do of literally any convention that I walk into, but like they're inconsistent about whether or not this hallway is badged or not badged, depending on what time of day it is. And therefore, a person could walk past this point, stand there, and then 20 minutes later be all in this con space without having a badge. Things like that bothered me. Like management stuff bothered, but it was like it was me being the nitpicky brain of I run events and I would do this differently if I were in charge kind of thing, not a like someone's going to die sort of thing. So let's like, or but so that's why a lot of people were taken aback because the convention was growing and growing and growing. I don't even know what the attendance numbers were those last few years.
They were really good. I can tell you that much.
The convention was
good.
growing, and we were all really excited because the Kalahari itself was expanding.
Yeah.
Right? So like, oh, the space is getting bigger. That means the con can get bigger and better.
Yeah, it's
right. Like that's what we're all thinking, and then suddenly, no, we're not going to have it anymore. It's like
I've even heard some people claim that the Kalahari expanded because of Daisho, which is patently
no.
That is patently not
course
true.
not.
Don't believe anyone who tells you that is lying to you, and that's not a good thing to believe.
But Daisho Con was, and let's understand this. Daisho Con had about 6,000 attendees, and at least that was the number that they were saying that they had when they went into 2019. I don't know what the 2019 numbers were, but in their promotional materials for 2019, they said they had over 6,000 attendees, which makes sense because the last official reported numbers I can find are from like 2015, which put the number at about like 4,400 something.
Mm-hmm.
So having, being in the 6,000s in 2019, the last year it was held like 6,000 or 7,000 people is not shocking. And it might have been more. I don't, but again, I don't have those figures.
Right.
And that may not sound like a huge convention to people like who live like on the East Coast or who live on the West Coast, but like you have to recognize that Daisho Con is a convention held in the Wisconsin Dells, a town with a population of 5,000.
So there's no locals. People are traveling to this thing.
People travel for like, hours to get to this convention. And regional conventions in Wisconsin, this was like Daisho Con was the second biggest anime con in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
With the bigger one being Anime Milwaukee, which is in Milwaukee because you have locals.
Milwaukee.
You have locals, all the high schoolers who can't drive to a con. Go to Anime Milwaukee. It's like so Daisho Con was putting out huge numbers. Now, for contrast, I run No Brand Con. We have an attendance right now of about 1,000. All right. We used to have more when we were in Eau Claire. When we moved to the Dells, we lost all of our day trippers, but like we're a much smaller event. But it's like events like this run on, usually, and Daisho Con started out this way. These fan-run events are completely volunteer labor, right? Like, I'm the convention director and president of No Brain Con Incorporated, technically. Do you know how much salary I draw or how much I will get paid? $0. I will get $0 for working and doing this event in what is effectively a part-time job that I'm also working beyond my full-time day job and the part-time job of running a podcast network. If you want to know where my free time went, I have none. So like, and because I came out of the traditions of like science fiction conventions, which are often run like this. Like, I understand that the comic convention world is full of much more for-profit ventures, but I came out of science fiction conventions where it's it's all done out of passion, right? And this is the way a lot of gaming conventions are too. Like, these are unpaid nonprofits where we are doing it because we love it. But frankly, and that's why, like, with COVID, we're able to run our event in 2022. We're doing it at a reduced budget than what we do, and we've been having to make cuts to manage things because we've had ongoing operational costs that continued throughout the pandemic with no event to bring in money, because that's the only source of income for No Brand Con, right? Is effectively registrations. Technically, like, there's some add-ons, but we only sell like the t-shirts for the con at the con. So again, there's zero income outside of registrations, and we've had ongoing costs like our storage unit, and which we share with a few other we share a storage unit with other organizations, like World 9 Gaming, which is not the vendor we use for video game rooms, but we share a storage area unit with them. Contractually, we also share stuff with Games Done Quick. Like, we have to pay our bills, and so we've had to keep paying those bills. But because we're a completely volunteer organization, we don't have salaries to pay, right? Like, none of our people working are drawing a salary, so we're all already like looking at our income other places. So, and that's what's allowed us to keep the lights on at No Brand Con, right? Like, the only concern we really had was when we thought we might not have people to run it, and we were able to fix that problem. So, like, we are, making, we're reducing some stuff that we would have spent money on for the convention that would have been new expansions and things like that, and we're not doing that. We're pulling some stuff back, but overall we can run an event as good as our normal events, because while we did have ongoing expenses, we didn't have massive ones, because again, we're not getting paid.
So
and you would think that a nonprofit run event would think that, hey, this isn't the full-time job of the people running this. We shouldn't pay anyone, right?
I'm going to say this. When I co-founded Daisho, we were nonprofit. When the former board members found out the current financials of Daisho and that they were drawing a profit, we weren't pleased about it, because we never designed the event for someone to profit off of it.
Well,
don't necessarily. I'm going to say that with how big, when an event starts getting that big, I don't necessarily think it's unethical to have some sort of a stipend for some staff. Right. I don't. However, that's the thing. I am hard stop not saying it is a bad thing to pay a stipend to long-term staffers. That's not what I'm going to stand against.
Right. Well, and I want to be clear, there are nonprofits that pay their employees, because when an event gets the size of, like, San Diego Comic-Con is the prime example of these. It's a full-time job, but it's a nonprofit. They pay their staff. And honestly, like, when it comes down to it, like if an event is financially stable enough, like, here's the thing. People talk about nonprofit, for-profit. Nonprofit, like, it's okay for a nonprofit to have a war chest of funds, though, because you always have to be ready for the bad times. Like, the whole reason why No Brand Con survived a drop in 500 attendees when we moved from Eau Claire to the Wisconsin Dells was because we used to have a war chest. We are now operating, like, and we're able to keep operating where we are because we kept our costs down, and with that loss of income, we now run pretty close to the wire. I will fully admit, like, we operate pretty close to the wire compared to what we used to, because again, we dropped a third in size. But but the reason why we survived that was because when we did have, like, a war chest of additional money, and, like, my thought is that you shouldn't start paying people out until you have enough money put away for the event where, in case everything fails, you can afford to run a second event.
Well, it's funny you'd phrase it that way. I think that's quite good.
That's
because Daisho Con's financials as a nonprofit became public.
Yeah.
Which they should be. That's how nonprofits operate.
Well, they're large. And I will fully admit that No Brand Con, we do not currently disclose our financials because we don't have enough money where we're legally required to. We're also a 501. We're a C7, not a C3 or C4, so we operate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, for an event of Daisho's size, it's good that that's out.
Right.
The issue comes in is that for the 2019 event, the board, that is 5 people who were in charge of Daisho Con, including still Missy, the same Missy who told me I had been involved with the con for too long in 2014. I just want to let that sink in. Missy and DJ, the same live-in boyfriend, were both on this board and drew $10,000 each, along with 3 other members. The next year, for 2020, despite having no event and thus having no income, they still did a pretty decent profit, albeit less than the year before. But let's...
Yeah, I think technically their 2020 payout was technically from the 2019 event.
Yeah.
Operational budget. But here's the thing. Yeah, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I think like in total between the 2 years they paid out like $70,000.
It was more than $80,000.
Okay.
I did the math earlier. It was more than $80,000.
We ran Nerd and Tie Expo for under 20.
Yeah.
We ran a whole convention for under 20.
You could run a pretty decent convention for that kind of money.
Yeah.
So
they're just giving themselves.
I'm sorry that it took us so long to get to this point, but yeah. Missy, under Missy's management, and I did forget to mention the other another fun part that was in there. A couple years after that, Missy quit, did a big actually stopped the cosplay contest dead cold to do a going away slideshow for herself.
I was there for that. Ugh.
And then the
big old pity party for herself.
And then the very next year came right back on staff and in charge of the entire event again.
It was so weird.
It was astounding. The lack of self-awareness is still astounding to me.
Yeah.
First off,
she's just
doesn't everybody know that
thank everybody?
Doesn't everybody know the place for pity parties is closing ceremony, so no one has to sit through it?
Yeah,
leave?
She held. It was while they were. Correct me if I'm wrong, again. It was while they were waiting for the results of the cosplay contest.
Yep.
Yeah, so everyone captive audience threw this pity party about how sad she was to go.
I remember sitting there with my friends, and we're just like, we don't care. We don't know who you are. We don't know who you are thanking and why you are crying.
Ironically,
get off the stage. Move on.
Ironically, for that, it was especially under Aussie, DJ, and Missy. Like I said, Aussie had that weird hard-on for legalese that he didn't actually understand. They wanted to turn the con more corporate, or so to speak. So anything that was like a human face to the con, they didn't like that kind of thing. Basically, anyone who represented the con who individually had a rapport with outside people would eventually get sacked, one way or the other. They really worked hard to turn Daisho Con faceless. So it was even weirder that she stopped this event cold to talk about how sad it was she was leaving.
And then she didn't leave.
Yeah, then she didn't leave. She came right back.
That really gets me. She throws this pity party about leaving and then doesn't leave. Why? Why even bother?
By the way, I think it's also worth noting, one of the bizarre hate mail letters that I got from Missy was how angry she was that I hosted the cosplay contest every year. And how angry she was that I personally never gave anyone else a chance, and how it was too much about my ego. Pretty,
what?
Yep. Pretty.
That's really dumb.
Yep. Yeah. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. This is all shit I've just not been sharing, because despite everything that was done, despite the fact that I was regularly verbally and emotionally abused by the same people who took these large paychecks. I still cared about the event. And there were people who that event meant a lot to. There were vendors I know who made good money from that event.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't going to kill it. I didn't want to risk killing it for them because of what happened to me. And maybe that's bad self-preservation on my end. That might be the case. I can't wait for this episode to come out and get comments about what a dumb fuck I am. But it just, I still wanted to believe in, and 2019, you could tell I was hearing more and more from former staffers, including people who worked to get me kicked out, about how they got kicked out. They got sacked after I left.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing is, when you set a standard that it's that easy to just public opinion kangaroo court people out of the con, they started doing that all the time. And you could kind of see it in 2019. The attendance was at an all-time high, but I couldn't find staff half the time.
Yeah.
And a good chunk of the staff were either inexperienced or young or clearly had no people skills and were kind of rude. And I don't know when it happened. I'd need to get more details on it, but they stopped being a student organization with UW-Stevens Point after I left, so they didn't have the campus to draw staff from anymore. So it was clear that they were hemorrhaging staff, and we know from their financials it sure looks like they were hemorrhaging money.
Yeah.
And it hurts. Like, I know I've done all this whining and complaining, and probably, I don't know, the few listeners we still have are probably going to just tell me what a dumb shit I am, but...
They're not.
But, like, that's blood, sweat, and tears. This was my life from roughly late 2007 through 2014. I put so much work into this event. And to be unceremoniously kicked out and then to watch it slide so far, and to see people leaving staff not feeling good about their experience, but bitter about having to work with Missy, that hurt.
Yeah.
And seeing that a con with as much money as, there's no way, I'm sorry, I refuse to believe it, there's no way Daisho Con wouldn't have had the money to keep running an event. EverCon is still happening.
Yeah.
No Brand Con is still happening. It's ridiculous that frickin' Daisho Con is claiming they had no options. They had options, they just burned every bridge.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know, man. Just
no, it's very bittersweet. And I mean, bitter in the way that it ended and the way it was run and all the behind the scenes shenanigans, but sweet. I mean, because Daisho was the convention where you didn't really go, like in the later years, especially when it went to the Kalahari, like so often, I would go to the con, not really for the convention itself, but because all of my friends were there. Like, I knew all of my other friends were going to be there, and I could go see them. So it's
yeah.
bittersweet that I won't have that aspect to it, and I do have like good memories from those conventions of just like being with my friends.
Oh God, it was that's probably the thing that hurts most, is that there are so many good memories. Hell, that was the first con where I started like showing my gender fluidity.
I mean, I met my significant other at Daisho Con.
Wow. That's
The last year it was in Stevens Point.
God, the Stevens
same-
Point years were so great. It's like
It- Andrew from our from the staff who I mentioned before, his now wife was someone who he worked with a lot on Daisho Con staff, and I'm just so happy that like they really bonded because of their work together on that. That was special. I'm glad I got to like just be there for that, I guess.
yeah, Daisho Con was an important part of our con scene, and like we wouldn't be talking
It
about
was.
this if it was just like some random like con that like we this was a big deal.
Yeah.
And losing it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's gross. It hurts so freaking much.
And it was mismanaged into the ground.
I'm relieved that it's not my stressor anymore. I'm relieved I don't have to figure out like room situations, because that became a nightmare the last 2 years. But yeah,
Stayed at the Ramada.
that's probably a good call.
Well, it was less time to drive to the Ramada than it was to walk from the hotel spaces.
No, legit.
Of course I stayed at the Ramada.
I appreciate that. I cosplay like a thought, and it is very cold outside.
Minivan.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could say something kind of just adjacent to the whole situation, for a while now we had been talking about, and for a few years there we had been talking about the con bubble.
Yeah.
And I think it's bursting.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. It was ironic because, Aussie and DC both used to say to me that they really wanted Daisho Con to last another 10 years. And, well,
yep,
that was the limit.
Jeez. Well, it's so hard.
Yeah. I mean, these past year, 2 years have been absolutely the hardest to run an event like these.
Completely agreed.
And it's like
it's no surprise that
I was not
cons are
shocked.
falling by the wayside.
I was not shocked when they canceled for 2021, just because I'm like, I have been to Daisho Con. I know what those hallways are like. It is literally impossible to run a safe event in that space the way that event is run.
Yeah, I still think I know a lot of people didn't agree with me on this one, but I still think they made the more ethical choice to cancel than per se Colossal Con did this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Colossal Con can go. I have negative things to say about Colossal Con.
but it doesn't change that from the outside. It sure looks like well, the ship was damaged. They just bolted.
Yeah.
And that hurts to see, because it wasn't supposed to be like this.
Well, and it's the loss of a major convention from the state, and again, a nonprofit. I'm very critical of the board paying themselves out, but I do think that even if they had been, what the problem is they weren't financially successful enough to do that payout. You know what I mean?
Not to that level for sure.
They just weren't there yet, and that's
maybe quite a smaller amount.
Yeah,
and they if they really wanted to, but those numbers are just, they're flabbergasting.
I had a sneaking suspicion that Daisho Con's entire business model was built on aggressive expansion without any thought of if it's a manageable number. And the fact that it completely imploded when they literally could not expand makes me feel vindicated in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like my goal, like with like when you're planning an event like that, like what you really have to do is say like what is our minimum number of attendees to survive, and then take like growth and expansion like that as bonuses, like, and then you build a war chest, and then when you have that war chest, that's when you consider expanding into more stuff. Like, and we did that as an event, and we made some mistakes, but because we waited till we had enough of a war chest, like, we were fine. Like, you can't, it's, you have to be ready for the hard times.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big tip we have for everyone out there. Savings are a good thing.
Yeah, savings are a real good thing.
You want money in savings so that when things get tough, when things unexpectedly happen, it's there for you, and you don't have to scramble or go under or anything even more terrible.
Yeah. So this is a very long episode.
I'm sorry about that. I did not mean to.
No,
all of that context was like needed, though. That's the worst part.
Why are you apologizing? This is a thing that needed to be talked about. Like this needed to be talked about, and it was very important that we talk about it.
Thank you for letting me get that out, mate.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have some more things to say later, but for right now.
Well, I think this would be like a really great topic to like. We should do more stuff about the downfall of certain conventions, because it's become clear that like, because there are other events we know a lot about what happened that maybe the world should be told.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll save that for an episode where we haven't gone over an hour and 40 minutes.
Sounds great.
Oh boy. So Vomit Hat Steve challenge, I guess. So the Vomit Hat Steve challenge is the part of the episode where I read part of a book, and the challenge to you, the listener, is to guess what book I'm reading from. What happens is, if you guess it right, is you get included in the Hall of Awesome. The benefits of the Hall of Awesome are as follows. 1, I read your name aloud every episode on the podcast. 2, I put your name on a web page that we've now used to feature prominently, but now have buried on the website. But you can find it if you look. And 3, I admit to you that I think that you do look better in that jacket than I do. You hear me, Archimize? You hear me? All right. So, the members of the Hall of Awesome currently are as follows. Archimize, Zero, Rena Innocenti, Cheesy McDamu, Krista, Slitherity, Shameless Otaku, The Random Ramblings Band, Corfan, Capito, Chris Graham, Lillisaurus, Paper Godzilla, Cavsy, The Minnesota Librarian, Sean Orange, Keith Shizuo, Sakura Sunset, Joel Kreisman, Patrick Delahanty, Wonderland Hearts, and Megsy Sass Council. And I will continue to read from this book until someone frickin' guesses it. Here is your line. How did he find you, Mr. Brick? If you know what book that's from, go to nerdandtie.com/contact, fill out the little form, and tell us. And please tell us. And so I can change books. And yeah, go there and do it. Or if you have like something else you want to say, like we often will do a mailbag section on these episodes. And so if you have like your opinions on like, say, Daisho Con, what the event meant to you, your thoughts on its sudden demise, go to nerdandtie.com/contact and tell us. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us your hopes. Tell us your dreams. Tell us exactly what we got wrong. I don't know, anything. Or if there is a convention collapse that you know about that you want us to talk about, feel free to reach out to us there too. Anyways, with that in mind, it's time to start wrapping down this very long episode of the podcast. remember, you can always subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, any place that takes an RSS feed. And remember, if you're on a platform you can rate like Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. If you want to follow the show on social media, you can follow us at Nerd and Tie on Twitter and Facebook.com/nerdandtie. And that's a great place. If you want to support the show financially, you can either sponsor an episode by clicking on the sponsor button on nerdandtie.com, or you can support me financially. I've got a Patreon at patreon.com/TRAGORN. Nick's got a Patreon at patreon.com/NickIzumi. Gen sells stuff as Ocelot Dude Designs, including these amazing succulent pillows. Do you have anything you want to say about your stuff, Gen?
It's plush and cozy.
Yeah, they're
Ooh.
neat. Anyways, remember, we're part of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network, and you can always chat with us every day, all day at our Discord, which you can find invite at nerdandtie.com/Discord, and you can listen to great shows. We're currently prepping Campaign 2 of Stormwood and Associates, which is going to come out next year, so that's going to be amazing. But you can listen to all of Campaign 1 right now at nerdandtie.com/Stormwood. It's like 135 episodes, and it's amazing. And it's finished. It's done. Stick a fork in it. Complete character arcs. It's amazing. I love it.
It's really good. Also, watch my Faye video. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. Nick put out a really cool, really good video on Faye Valentine, and you can find that on the Nick Izumi show on the Nerd and Tie site or at the Nick Izumi YouTube channel. I'm Trey Dorn.
I'm Nick Izumi.
I'm Gen Proc.
And this has been the show. I don't know why it's been the show, but this has been the show. Nick, say your catchphrase.
Keep on spocking in the free world.
And we did that. And somehow, deep down in our hearts, in our soul, you knew that this was going to be a long episode because, well, your podcast player told you, like, it's right there. The time code is right there.
Ended already. I'm so cold.
You knew it the whole time.
I want to turn my heater on.
Embrace the cosmos of your heart.
Yeah.